This video contains content that some may find disturbing. We will be delving into the subject of death and suicide. This video's purpose is to encourage greater awareness, reflection, and contemplation into what many find uncomfortable or confusing. I hope you will stay and join me for this discussion. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Hancock with Beyond You Coaching. Death is a very taboo subject for most people. Though we all know that we are mortal and have an expiration date, we don't like to think that one day we will all die. This is considered morbid. Yet death is just as much a part of us as life. If we are to rise in consciousness and explore our true nature, then Death 101 is a compulsory course. So let's have the courage to discuss what so many are frightened of. 3 weeks ago, I lost a family member to COVID. My cousin Sergio was 47 years old, otherwise healthy, and had no pre-existing health conditions. Like so many other families that have lost loved ones to COVID, Sergio's death was a great shock to everyone. And like so many grieving families, the pandemic has made mourning his passing complicated. Wakes and funerals are now either altered or entirely eliminated due to cremation instead of burial. Traditional family gatherings for prayer and mourning are now relegated to digital meetings. Though I am not Catholic, I have been humbled by the strength, fortitude, and courage my family has expressed during this time of grief. And my heart goes out to all the other families that have suffered a COVID-related death or health complication. During this time period, I received a comment from a viewer who had asked me to talk about how to get rid of suicidal thoughts. This person also added 2 more additional comments on how they had attempted suicide twice. You will not find these comments on this channel because I made the decision to delete them. I didn't delete them because I didn't want to address them. Rather, I didn't want other viewers to read in such graphic detail how this person had harmed themselves. Though I know that this individual was reaching out for help, I must also think of how their words invariably affect other people. So in one instance, we see a very tragic death with a virus that the entire world is dealing with. In another instance, we see an equally tragic reaction to mental anguish and suffering. This question of suicide and having suicidal thoughts is a very timely one. The pandemic is certainly affecting people's mental health. Domestic abuse and suicide have been on the rise for quite some time. People are struggling to work from home, stay indoors, social distance, wear masks, and manage family responsibilities with at-home schooling. There are many that have lost their jobs, have limited income, and don't have access to family or friends. When the world is shifting, changing, and transforming, what are we to do? What choices do we have? Do we even have a choice anymore? These difficult questions remind me of the questions tackled in the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. If you haven't read this book, I highly encourage you to do so. This book was written in 1946, just after World War II. It discusses the reality of living in a concentration camp during the Holocaust. Though a grim subject, this book offers direct insight into the mind and heart of human beings when faced with unimaginable suffering. This book discusses how many prisoners were worked to exhaustion, suffered disease and illness, starved, were physically beaten and mentally abused. So many people saw their life situation as utterly hopeless. Their lives were no longer their own, and there was no end in sight. For many, this created the perfect storm for suicidal ideation. For those that had enough strength, the electric fence served as the most viable self-annihilation option. Others chose traditional hanging from nearby trees. But the most common form of suicide was simply losing the will to live. These individuals took the more passive road to self-annihilation by refusing to eat, speak, or even move. As they lied in their own excrement, they slowly and very painfully waited to die. Curiously, not everyone saw their circumstances as hopeless. There were some prisoners that chose not to give up. Despite the horrific, sadistic, and traumatic experiences these people endured, these prisoners chose to live another day. What then is the difference between these two types of individuals, those that chose to give up hope and those that did not? This is precisely what Viktor Frankl studied while in the concentration camp, he himself being a prisoner and also a neurologist and psychologist. He wanted to know what makes some people want to live and others want to die. Viktor observed both from his own inner thoughts as well as the behavior and actions of others that there was a marked difference between those that actively or passively committed suicide and those that continued with the will to live. He noticed that those individuals who wanted to commit suicide had fallen victim to a familiar pattern of thinking. He watched over and over again as the same basic theme emerged. The suffering was too grave, too harsh, too painful. People then retreated into their own mind for respite. They replayed memories of happier times, immersing themselves in a world far away from their moment-by-moment agony. By avoiding the present, they escaped into their past. When asked how they felt about things, the response was always the same: I have nothing to expect from life anymore. But the very retreat and avoidance of the present moment was to be their eventual demise. As Viktor says, the prisoner who had lost faith in the future, his future, was doomed. With his loss of belief in the future, he also lost his spiritual hold. He let himself decline and become subject to mental and physical decay. Yet ironically, Viktor discovered that those who chose to live experienced a very different moment-to-moment reality. These individuals chose to stay fully present to their suffering. They resisted the temptation to retreat into the recesses of old comforting thoughts and memories. When a man finds that it is his destiny to suffer, he will have to accept his suffering as his task, his single and unique task. The courage to face their suffering opened the space for these prisoners to give their lives meaning. Meaning being defined by the individual, a unique, specific, and personal meaning that belonged to them and only them. Thus, a profound discovery was made. Viktor saw that the prisoners who gave up on life had expected something. They expected life to turn out different. They were disappointed, disheartened, and defeated. These prisoners saw themselves as the recipient, the one for which life should get up and dance. When life didn't deliver to them, they gave up. But Viktor realized that these individuals were looking at life from the wrong perspective. It was not a question of what life should deliver to us, but what we could deliver to life. It did not really matter what we expected from life, but rather what life expected from us. What does this mean? Viktor explains. I remember two cases of would-be suicide, which bore a striking similarity to each other. Both men had talked of their intentions to commit suicide. Both used the typical argument: they had nothing more to expect from life. In both cases, it was a question of getting them to realize that life was still expecting something from them. Something in the future was expected of them. We found, in fact, that for the one, it was his child whom he adored and who was waiting for him in a foreign country. For the other, it was a thing, not a person. This man was a scientist and had written a series of books which still needed to be finished. His work could not be done by anyone else, any more than another person could ever take the place of the father and his child's affections. This uniqueness and singleness, which distinguishes each individual and gives a meaning to his existence, has a bearing on creative work as much as it does on human love. When the impossibility of replacing a person is realized, it allows the responsibility which a man has for his existence and its continuance to appear in all its magnitude. A man who becomes conscious of the responsibility he bears toward a human being who affectionately awaits for him, or to an unfinished work, will never be able to throw away his life. He knows the why for his existence and will be able to bear almost any how. It was Nietzsche that said, "He who has a why to live for can bear with almost any how." So we see that the question is not what is life offering me, but rather what can I offer to life? Viktor learned, for the meaning of life differs from man to man, from day to day, and from hour to hour. What matters, therefore, is not the meaning of life in general, but rather the specific meaning of a person's life at a given moment. So we see that each person is tasked with creating their own meaning, specific to them, and with the freedom to change with every given moment. So again, we ask, how does one get rid of suicidal thoughts? What meaning are you currently giving to your life? Are you waiting for someone or something else to give you purpose? What expectations are not being met for you? Are you willing to ask not what you can get from life, but what you can give? Who do you need to become in order to make that happen? Are you willing to let go of your current identity to consciously create a new one? If so, who do you choose to be? What beliefs, thoughts, emotions, and behaviors would this new you choose to experience? These are not rhetorical questions. I encourage you to rewind this video, take out a pen and paper, and spend a minimum of 30 minutes in answering these questions. So what have we learned from these Holocaust survivors? We learned that we are the dancers, the creators, the powerful masters. As you think, so shall you become. What then is the purpose of life? Living is life's only purpose. As always, I thank you all for being here with me, and if you have any questions you'd like answered, please let me know in the comments below or email me at youtube@beyondyou.coach. Please help me grow this channel by liking, sharing, and commenting. And if you are new here and are interested in learning more about the mind, personal growth, and higher awareness, I invite you to subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching.